Hey, it's me, Derek D.C. Phillips, bringing you all things frightful. And today we are going to dive right into the mystery of who blew up the Georgia Guidestones. Now, if you're not familiar with the Georgia Guidestones, they are, or were, known as a mini-Stonehenge. And the Wikipedia page, if you go check it out, has been updated to past tense because it was recently blown to smithereens. It's always been subject to vandalism, but this was on a whole new level. The Georgia Guidestones comprise a single monument that was erected in the middle of nowhere, Elbert County, Georgia. And there were 6 granite slabs over 19 feet tall. So Georgia is known for granite. That's kind of a big deal. If you're from Georgia or if you've ever visited Georgia, you've probably seen or heard about Stone Mountain. Especially in the last few years, it's come under scrutiny for its Confederate monument that is etched on the front, but that's a story for another day. Back to the Guidestones, the 6 granite slabs are inscribed with 10 guidelines that touch on advice for the future or guidance for the future. So they talk about population control, globalization, really hinting at a single or new world order. And these guidelines are etched in 8 world languages so that everyone could read them. And legend has it that there was also a time capsule buried underneath, and there were astronomic features included in reading the stars, the alignment of the planets, all that good stuff. The Guidestones were commissioned in 1979 and completed in 1980. They were commissioned by a man with the alias R.C. Christian, who claimed to represent, quote, a small group of Americans who seek the age of reason. And this was generally thought to be a meeting place in the event of the apocalypse. You gotta think, Cold War era, nuclear power and threats, it kind of makes sense within the context of time. Mr. Christian eventually handed over ownership of the Guidestones to the county, Elbert County, and they were unveiled by a congressman who praised the monument for emphasizing ecological preservation. Mr. Christian published a book in 1986, or someone claiming to be Mr. Christian. All signs point to it actually being Mr. Christian. It was called Common Sense Renewed and addressed controversy around the monument. You gotta think, this was, again, in the middle of nowhere. I'm not using that as a slight. I'm saying it actually was in the middle of nowhere in a field in Elbert County, Georgia, which already is a rural county. So there was a lot of talk, even from locals, about what does this mean? Do we want it here? You know, a lot of people agreed it was good for tourism. It was large. It was impressive. So they let it stand for a long time. But it did not stand without its controversy. And I realize I'm a grammar nerd. So when I say it, I'm referring to the monument. When I say them, I'm referring to the stones. That bothered me for a second, so I needed to clear that up. The following is a quote from Common Sense Renewed by Mr. Christian. We seek common sense pathways to a peaceful world. So, sounds like some universalist Unitarian ideology. Harmless enough, right? I will tell you that I myself visited the Guidestones years ago, and a couple of times actually, because it's just a strange sight. If you ever went, or if you start reading more about it, there's an odd energy about the place. It was, again, in the middle of nowhere. I cannot stress that enough. I'm not sure exactly why the site itself was chosen, maybe for the granite deposits, but again, it's in the middle of nowhere. I've said that like 4 times at this point. But trying to find the Guidestones in and of itself when I went was difficult. And I stopped at a couple of places along the way, a Dollar General, the usual places, a gas station, and the GPS that I was using was on the fritz because Wi-Fi wasn't really, obviously Wi-Fi wasn't working, but my network was failing me the further I got out into farmland. Anytime that you stopped into a Dollar General, again, like I said, people kind of gave you the side eye. I think they know what's up. They know why people are coming out to their town to visit without you even having to say anything. But when you do ask for directions or ask to be redirected closer to the right path, you weren't really met with the friendliest of tones and greetings. You don't feel 100% welcome from everybody you ask and stop for guidance along the way. It's almost like they don't want you there, whether that's because they know that vandalism is a thing or they're just irritated by observers coming in, gawking. I can get that. I can totally understand. Eventually, I did make it. Here and there, my signal would come back, my network would kick back in, or I would find Wi-Fi along the way and get back onto the path. It took a lot longer than I anticipated because of those setbacks and technology not cooperating. But when I finally got there, what I thought was interesting the first time was there were a couple of cars there, tourists stopping by. Across the street, there was kind of a gravel or dirt path. I'm not exactly sure. I think it might have been dirt. But across the way, there was this almost igloo-shaped white building, and it almost looked like an observatory. There were cameras. You could tell. I mean, there was no hiding the cameras around the Guidestones. They were on tall posts out in the middle of nowhere. Again, let's just keep a count of how many times I've said that or will be saying that. Maybe turn this into a drinking game if you'd like. Take a shot. I don't care. There was someone watching. I'm not sure who, and even online in digging a bit, I'm not sure who monitors those cameras. Maybe someone from the county, maybe Parks and Recreation, but that is not clear. And it's not like a visitor center or anything like that where people are welcome to come in and stop by and learn more. It was just a building out there. I have also heard from friends / family members who have gone. There was one man in particular who people reported seeing on multiple visits who claimed to be a pastor, and he was just kind of pacing around back and forth. And as people showed up to see the Guidestones, to read the inscriptions, to poke around just out of curiosity, he would start warning them about how the site was satanic, that it was, there was nothing good to come from visiting the Guidestones, to digging into the mystery of the Guidestones. And he claimed to be there, again, as a pastor, warning people about the message that the Guidestones proclaimed. Again, I'm not sure of his identity, but if you start digging or if you ask anyone who visited, this man happened to be there. So he was almost kind of an unofficial patrol of the area. I'd love to know if anyone in the comments can tell me more about him or where he is these days. I'd love to hear from him, ask him some questions. I myself never got to talk to him one-on-one, but again, multiple sources confirm that he was there multiple times that people visited and openly talked about the Guidestones and his opinion on them. Side note quickly, can you hear my dog snoring? Hopefully that just adds character to the video. Anyway, let's get into some of the theories behind the origins of the Guidestones and of Mr. Christian. There are multiple cult claims, and I just want to dive into that name of R.C. Christian first of all. A lot of people, especially at the time, said that Christian was an obvious reference to Christianity. However, most evidence points to the fact that it is a reference to Rosicrucian. And Rosicrucianism, this is just a quick definition that I'll read, is a spiritual and cultural movement that arose in Europe in the early 17th century after the publication of several texts purported to announce the existence of a hitherto unknown esoteric order to the world and made seeking its knowledge attractive to many. There's a lot of mystery surrounding Rosicrucianism, and the manifestos associated with Rosicrucianism also reference Kabbalah, Christianity. There's sort of a mix of mysticism here. I would also like to point out that Rosicrucianism inspired rites in Freemasonry. A lot of the mythology surrounding secret societies, a lot of the rumors, all tie back to Rosicrucianism, even the secret societies and orders that we see today. For example, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which is active in the Atlanta area. So I would imagine that there are ties potentially going way back to the establishment of the Guidestones. I will say that the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn is active on Twitter. I took a look at their page, and no red flags. A lot of these secret societies or these smaller local orders, they specialize again in mysticism, tarot reading, numerology, astrology, that sort of thing. Your basic everyday magic. And if you'd like to do some digging on your own, Rosicrucianism in turn was established by Christian Rosencreutz, who is a legendary figure, possibly allegorical, what I'm reading online. So we don't know how much is attributed to his actual existence and how much is legend. So that's interesting. He was present in 3 manifestos that were published in the 1600s. I also want to call out the Urantia book, and I discovered this potential tie while listening to a podcast about cults on Sleepytime Tea. That's right, the little boxes with the cute bear that you find in the grocery store has some interesting and dubious ties, which I found out about. I'm going to link the YouTube video that I watched. Really cool channel there. I'll put it in the description below so you can check that out on your own. But the Urantia book was originated sometime between the mid-20s and the mid-50s, 1920s, 1950s, and no one knows exactly who wrote it. But again, as this YouTube video that I watched delved into the origins of Sleepytime Tea Co., the founder, that sort of thing, I thought, this sounds a lot like the ideology that's present on the Guidestones and inscribed in the Guidestones. It goes into a lot of high-level topics, origin and meaning of life, mankind's place in the world and in the universe at large, the relationship between God, the life of Jesus, all these things, which are pretty common fodder for organized religion. Again, no major red flags there. However, the Urantia Foundation, a United States-based nonprofit group, published this book in the mid-1950s. So we're not exactly sure when it was first written, but it was put out there to the public at large in 1955. And in the early 2000s, it essentially entered the public domain. So you can go check it out. It can be used, reused, repurposed, just like Winnie the Pooh recently entered the public domain, and that's why we see that there's been a slasher movie made and is being released about Winnie the Pooh, because Winnie entered the public domain. That was a strange sidebar, but I think you get where my mind was going with that explanation. The Urantia book becomes controversial because of its ideals. For humankind, it really stresses, Aryan principles and sort of purity of bloodline, that sort of thing. So again, things go left in terms of the ideology there when you really start getting into the Urantia book. On the surface, you think, oh, this sounds nice, lovey-dovey, love everybody, we're all part of the same universe, but it gets dark when you delve deeper. People at the time that the Guidestones were erected implicated Ted Turner. That's a very common rumor out there, and he's denied all involvement. There's really not a whole lot of evidence beyond the surface tying him to the Guidestones. If you don't know Ted Turner, he's a really big deal, especially in Atlanta. He's a media mogul, philanthropist, etc. He was involved with Jane Fonda for a really long time. But again, there's not a whole lot tying him to the Guidestones. I think people in that era saw him as a very rich person with the type of expendable income who could erect the Guidestones. I think he was originally implicated as someone on the world stage. He took national news, really local news, made it national, then went to that international level. So I think that was the tie there, and there's not much tangible beyond that from what I found. Again, if you find evidence to the contrary, please drop down in the comments. Let's jump ahead in the timeline and get into the explosion itself. It occurred in the wee hours of July 6, 2022, so very recently, and it was so strong that it actually was felt by locals. The ground shook. Now, the GBI is investigating. It was some kind of bomb dynamite combination explosion, and it appears that the Swahili Hindi slab was targeted, and the rest were affected as a consequence, so they had to be cleared. I mean, it really was that potent. There is video that exists, but no suspects have been ID'd, which I find extremely odd, especially, like I said, I have been there, and the cameras were very prominent. There is footage of the car speeding away after the explosion. I find it extremely odd. Also, officials dug underneath. I mean, they were already there and clearing the area to locate the time capsule that was supposed to be buried there, but they could not find it. I don't know if that means that there never was a time capsule or if it had been dug up and in the dirt placed back in the aftermath of the explosion. I am not sure, and I don't know what that time capsule may have contained. There was never any description even prior to the explosion when the Guidestones were erected. Very, very suspicious to me. So who are our suspects? Again, no names have been released. The footage that was released is not super clear. I will say it is very strange that a candidate for governor here in Georgia, well, not really a candidate anymore, not a viable candidate, but she was in the primaries, the Republican primary, to figure out who would represent the GOP in the election coming up in November. But big name that gained a lot of traction, essentially for her conspiracy theories and things of that sort, was Candace Taylor. Just mentioned she was a gubernatorial primary candidate who ultimately received just over 3% of the vote. She is a self-proclaimed educator and school board member in a South Georgia district. Her motto for her overall campaign is Jesus, Guns, and Babies. And after some extensive digging, I found that she completed her doctoral studies at a Virginia university founded by Pat Robertson, who you may be familiar with from the 700 Club. He's been around for a long time. And I thought it was just interesting to include that the original name of the university was Christian Broadcasting Network University. And I want to read a quick quote from Candace Taylor, just so you can understand a bit more about her. She says, "I'm not a big women's empowerment person. I wish there were some alpha males to go get the job done, but instead, they fall in line with a good old boys system. And so I felt led by the Lord to run for office because I won't bend my knee to tyranny. I won't bend my knee to backroom deals. I won't take money I'm not supposed to." Now, you're probably wondering why I'm spending time delving into her campaign and giving you some background. An entire page on her website is still live and dedicated to what she calls Executive Order Number 10, Demolish the Satanic Georgia Guidestones. So this was a key piece of her platform, which I find fascinating because, of course, as a Georgia native and local, we all know about the Guidestones, but I didn't think that really it had been a hot topic since the 1980s, and nobody's really been worried about them or the kind of effect that they're having. We don't even know who is really behind the Guidestones being erected. To my knowledge, Mr. Christian may have passed, has not been in the public spotlight since the 1980s. So anyway, if you check out her website, she has a trailer that is still up and active, associating the Guidestones with practices of human sacrifice, I'm not kidding, and linking them to the creation and dissemination of COVID-19. Now, on her website, this is the statement that accompanies this trailer where she identifies herself as some kind of warrior against the evil that lurks behind the Guidestones. She says, "For decades, the global Luciferian regime has seeped its way into our government. They demoralized us with humiliation rituals as they tore down our historical monuments, persecuted our children, locked us down in our homes, and forced us into becoming walking science experiments through a global vaccination program. And so I should just call out for a second there, I'll pause. She's referring to Confederate statues being pulled down during the Black Lives Matter movement, that sort of thing. She goes on to say, they erected statues spelling out the exact plans they had for us, and today, we the people of Georgia say no more. Again, the Guidestones were put up in 1980. The math's not math in here. But she says, it's time for us to return the favor. On my first day as governor of Georgia, which is not going to happen, I will move to demolish, all caps, the demonic plans of our enemy. The satanic agenda is not welcome in our state. Support my fight by contributing and watch as I turn the Georgia Guidestones into dust. So, do I think she herself did it? I'm not saying that. I want to make that very clear, immensely clear. But it seems like a huge coincidence for these stones to stand for 40 plus years, and then this candidate releases such a strongly worded statement, and kaboom. I'd love to know what you think. Go down to the comments and let me know your opinions, your thoughts, your theories. I'll also put some links down there, as usual, for further reading and exploration, because I find this topic to be so fascinating. I don't know what will come of this GBI investigation, but maybe someone will be named, maybe they won't. It's just all very odd, and the circumstances are truly bizarre.